Welcome to the Woke Wild Women's podcast. I'm Roxanne, and this over somewhere is Bethany.
Hello. It'll probably be on
And
the opposite side.
yeah, I know. Whenever we point, it's always in the opposite direction. And
And
if you're
that's if
listening,
you're
it doesn't really matter.
right. I was gonna say, and that's only if you're watching it on YouTube, where you get to see our beautiful faces.
Yes. And today we're talking about shadow work. This is like messy and not fun stuff to talk about. And today's the perfect day to talk about it because, um, and I think I feel like Bethany and I are so often in the work of doing, in the shadow doing work.
Yeah.
Um, and just like to get clear where I'm at right now is my uncle passed away on Monday. I just got the news this morning. I have a friend who's getting ready to go into major surgery next week, and I am her support person. Bethany is in the middle of moving
hmm Well, also
herself.
recovering from being sick, and my son has been sick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, this is the shadow. This is the space that we're in right now. So, we're going to talk about shadow work in general, but also kind of where we're at as well. There might be some like personal processing, but the goal of this podcast is to kind of give a little bit of backstory or what we understand to be shadow work, bring it out into the conversation. Let's talk about it. Um, because shadow work is usually done it's a very vulnerable place to be. We're talking about the things we don't want to talk about, we don't want to address, we don't want to acknowledge, um, but they're the things that won't let us be until we acknowledge them.
Sit with them.
So
Sit and have tea with them or coffee.
get to
Yeah.
know your shadow.
Yeah. Get to know your shadow.
So Bethany, how would you describe shadow work? What does that mean to you? What does that mean for you, and also like collectively? What do you
Mhm.
understand it to be?
Um, I see it as our unconscious mind, our unconscious behaviors and patterns, the things that we don't recognize are actually driving our some of our behaviors and why we want certain things or why we do certain things. It's most easily tapped in through feminine energy. So it doesn't mean that you have to be a female, like in a female body. Um, and everyone has feminine energy within them, but yeah, it's all of the messy, gross, like, ew, why did I just think that? Why am I feeling this? The judgmental, like stuff that we really don't like about ourselves or other people. Um, and that's also a judgment. So it can be, I mean, you could absolutely also own and love all of your shadows, whether, society believes it's appropriate or not. But I think there's a general way of conditioning within humans to like see being and I get that this can cause destruction, which is why it's viewed this way, but like being jealous or being envious or being you know uh vindictive or all of those things, all of those are like shadow energies, being very negative, being uh super depressed, like wanting to self-harm, like all of that stuff can be destructive if you take action upon it, but it still doesn't make you a bad person, for feeling those things. But I think there's this fear around it in society because when people are not taught how to not act upon these feelings, it has caused destructive behaviors in the past. And so therefore there's this like element of we have to suppress it, deny it, avoid it, or somehow control it in order for it to not become destructive to our planet, to other human beings, to ourselves. So like I get the like stigma there is around it, because of that.
Right.
However, I think the way we go about educating, well, I don't really feel like there is education. I think people are starting to try to do that now. It's like help other people, like figure out how to get through your shadows. But there's been zero education on how to have, I think it's like an element of self-control, right? So it's like, and trusting yourself, trusting that
Yeah.
you, just because you're feeling this way doesn't mean that it's going to be like this forever, for one, or that you don't have to act on it, like I said. And so now I think we're moving into the era of teaching ourselves and others how to understand what we're experiencing, so we don't become destructive, and we use it as a way to actually empower ourselves and understand ourselves better, rather than break ourselves down, which I think is what, if you get really deep into your shadows, that's usually what happens.
Yeah. For me, shadow work is just it's the pieces of ourselves that gosh. Um there's an element of awakening, I think, that happens, and it happens at any age, and it continues to happen. It's a continual evolution of understanding kind of the behind the scenes, what's happening behind our automatic lives.
Yeah.
I really equate it to like in the Wizard of Oz, the when they pull back the curtain and
Hmm.
he's just like, but in the front, it's just like this all powerful Oz on this big screen.
Yeah.
But the reality is, there's this frantic person operating, trying to make everything feel normal.
Yeah.
But there's all this stuff that's going on that he's trying to hide.
Yes.
And so for me, it's a continual revelation,
Mm.
like just layers being peeled back. And every time that happens, there's an opportunity to take a look at stuff that um, has been operating to keep us in this safe zone.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's the same thing over and over and over. Sometimes it's a different perspective on the same theme. Sometimes it's something completely different. But it's that moment where you realize that that your subconscious is driving your behaviors, which is actually, as a human, like, what is it, 85% of our daily lives are completely unconscious.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like just the fact that I'm breathing and that I'm the way I'm talking, that's all unconscious.
Yeah.
um my conscious mind is not operating that, and we have to trust that our unconscious is going to allow us to get through the day. But when we're doing shadow work, we're really like pulling it apart
Yeah.
to decide, does this really serve me?
Hmm.
um and there was something that you said about, I don't remember exactly how you said it, but in my mind I had this vision of like the masculine and the feminine. The masculine is the forward motion, the action, the thing that you're doing,
Hmm.
and the feminine is what you're feeling,
Hmm.
what is happening right now in your heart, in your head, like what are the feelings that are coming up. And then the masculine is, and what are you going to do about it? And so
Hmm.
shadow work is very much in the feminine realm of just being with, what are you feeling?
Hmm.
um, I listened to a podcast or a piece of a podcast or a book or something yesterday that had me kind of thinking about how we relate to our emotions.
Hmm.
um, and it reminded me, my husband's always asking me, are you okay? Or how are you doing? And I know that what he wants to hear is I'm good, or I'm
Yeah.
fine, or I'm happy. But there's so many different nuances
Hmm.
to happy. Like just take the word happy. Uh, You can be happy, you can be ecstatic, you can be content, you can be calm.
Yeah.
I'm like, happy can be anything, but it's a
It's a range.
uh,
Yeah.
yeah, it is such a range. And the shadow work really, again, is like pulling apart all those pieces and seeing the nuances
Yeah.
of um, what you're feeling, what you're dealing with, what is operating underneath your automatic everyday
Yeah.
work.
Yeah. It's depth. It's going very deep, um, into whatever it is you're experiencing, and just sitting with it and being still. And we are definitely conditioned in society. We're definitely more masculine driven, um, because, you know, we're a patriarchal society, and it values taking action over sitting and resting and being still. Um, and I think that, but I also think that comes from a fear of feminine energy, because of not fully understanding it. Also, I think
Right.
there's an unpredictability to it that is that masculine energy is afraid of.
Hmm.
You know, I mean, it shows up in relationships all the time where men are like afraid to say or do something because they don't want to set off their woman, right? And I just want to roll my eyes at that, but it's like, that's really just because it's like, but that is you, that shows you that that masculine energy, whether, you know, whatever it is actually afraid of their own feminine power, and
Yeah.
that they're also afraid of actually being able to contain it, because that's what masculine energy does. It contains feminine energy. It creates space for the feminine to do that deep work, to tap in and be in her feminine energy most of the time, or whenever she needs to. So I think, and that just shows up in larger society, and that why I think feminine energy has been suppressed, and especially in men, like who are actually men, like in male bodies. Um, uh, that's where I think the patriarchy came from, you know, was that suppression, because they were told that it's not okay to be emotional. You can't feel feelings, when actually a lot of men are a lot more sensitive, you know, are really sensitive. And I don't say that in like a
Yeah.
judgmental way. Like, I absolutely love it. Um,
Yeah. And I think I totally agree with you. There's that old adage that like if men had to experience childbirth, they would they like
yeah,
the
they
whole world
crumble.
would be different
They crumble. Men,
because
men, I'm not judging you if you're listening.
no, not at all. But I do believe that most men are not given the tools to
Yeah.
even be able to name what they're feeling, you
Yeah.
know, to go into, yeah, you know, the automatic is to just shut it down because they can't define it, they can't
Hmm.
master it, they can't
Yeah.
um,
Analyze it.
put it to put it to good use,
Well,
you
yeah,
know, whatever it
yeah,
is.
exactly. It seems like you're right. It seems like, what do I do with this? Like, there's no point to it. You know,
Yeah.
that's the whole, that's masculine,
Yeah.
is like, there has to be, you know, they compartmentalize things, and they, you know, put things in boxes, and they have to label it, and everything's very logical and makes sense and scientific. And I get that. Like, I think that's a great strength, but you also have to have that side, that deep knowing of like, or not needing to make any sense, you know.
Yeah.
Like, it just is what it
Yeah.
is. Just enjoy it or allow it.
I feel like the masculine is like the what and the how,
Hmm.
and the feminine is the why.
Yeah. Yes.
Like
Yeah.
the 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 shadow work that we do really uncovers why we're here, why we're human,
Hmm.
why are we having this experience?
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and the masculine is what can be gained from this experience.
Yeah.
And the feminine is just we're having an experience and we're gonna broaden our understanding of this experience as much as we can
Hmm.
through language, through you know, conversations, connections, through just sitting with.
Hmm.
Um, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I find when I'm doing shadow work, like unconsciously or consciously, it's really hard for me to find the words to
Yeah.
express what I'm feeling because so often and I love words. I am a wordsmith. I come from a family of, you know, my mother was an English major. My oldest child works in a library and is all about the English language
Hmm.
and how we use it and how language affects how we see the world, all that stuff.
And
Love
you
it.
get to write. Yes.
And when I'm really deep in it, I don't have words. I
Yeah.
really don't. Um, Wow, and this, you know, this whole conversation, we're going to go off on lots of tangents.
I know. I love it.
One of the things that comes up, and this isn't necessarily shadow, but it is when we're in an intimate situation, I'm thinking like sex.
Hmm.
I mean, that is like the most vulnerable. It's one of
Sorry.
those watershed kind of moments where we can really bring everything to the table and transform our fear, our anger, our desire, our grief.
Yeah.
and transform it in that sexual energy and that sexual
Hmm.
exchange. Um, but one of the things that my husband and I um, frequently, well, not so much anymore, but we frequently come to this place where he's like, I wish you would tell me what you want. And I'm like, in the moment, I don't have the words.
Right.
And
Exactly.
to have to create those words takes me out of the moment and into this logical brain space
Right. Into
to
his
create,
space. Yeah.
yeah, to create the words.
Yeah, that's
So it is,
funny. I was gonna say, sorry to interrupt you.
yeah.
But I was on a date with somebody, and that was something he was like, "Well, what do you want?" We're trying to figure out like where to go, and I was just like, "I don't know. Like, I don't know. I'm like, I'm just enjoying walking around and talking to you. Like, that's all I want to do." And it was like, "You don't tell." He was like, he was joking, but he was just like, "You don't tell somebody that you don't know what you want." And I was like, "Why not?" Like, but I think it was like, but I think the mask, and so and it wasn't like in a way where he was being like dismissive. I don't think it was more like they get because the masculine energy wants to create that space for the feminine, right? They want us to tell them how to be, so that we're happy, so that they feel like they're doing their job, basically. Like, men really want to make women happy. They
Yeah.
really do.
They want the
Um,
attaboys. That's what
yes,
my
bless
husband
their
calls them,
hearts.
is the
They're so
attaboys.
sweet. Like, they're so sweet. Um, and they do that. They need that praise, that recognition. Like, they really need that, and that's awesome. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing at all. um but so when you can't tell them, and they have to guess, or they have to then tap into their intuition or their feminine energy to feel it out and to figure it out, that's scary to them. So then they're like, well, I don't know what to do. Like, tell me, like, are you good? Like you said with with Eric, will ask you, are you good, or are you okay, or what do you want? And you're like,
Yeah.
well, I don't know. You figure out what I want. Like, tune into me and figure it out. And it's not that we're like passing the responsibility off on them, but we're inviting them into the space to access their feminine energy,
And to
so that they can meet us
collaborate.
there. Yeah. So we can collaborate, so we can, and that back and forth, of, um, yeah, I don't know. And, or it's just like, yeah, or just be in the space with me and not need to have an answer.
Yeah. Yeah. And not to say that all men are this way and all women are this way, because I
No.
definitely have that masculine drive, and
Yeah.
both both
We
Bethany
both
and
do.
I,
Yeah.
yes, we've talked about that a lot, about our masculine has, I mean, we've had to be the masculine for ourselves
Yeah.
in many cases in our life, and continually. I've been in a relationship for 13 years, and um I still have to access my own masculine
Yeah.
a lot.
Hmm. And
Um
as a single parent, I mean, you were a single parent at one point, and I
mhm.
am now, and you have to be both for your children,
Yeah.
or know how to switch back and forth, whatever they need.
Yeah, yeah, and men need to tap into that intuition. And
Hmm.
for a lot of men, they just have never had the opportunity. They've never been encouraged.
Yeah.
They've never been educated.
Yeah.
They've never had a space where that is okay.
Right. And they don't want to feel like they're bad at something.
Yeah.
They
Oh,
really don't
so
want to feel like they can't do something that makes them feel really bad, about themselves. Like, they need that boost. Like you said, they need that, like, attaboy, that encouragement, that, um,
yeah.
feeling like they're doing what they're supposed to do. So if it's been suppressed, or like, negative kind of connotations to it, they're not going to want to even dip their toes in there, because they're
Yeah.
like, ooh, I remember last time, or, uh
It's messy.
it's
And
yeah.
they want to be able to have this, beginning, end point, check mark, I did the thing, I'm good, I've been acknowledged, and shadow
Exactly.
work is just,
Sometimes there's no real, you never come to a conclusion of the purpose. It's just, okay, that was cool. I just needed to experience that, apparently. And I guess I'll figure out what it taught me 10 years later, like, or next year.
or just, even for me, it's finding the gift in the discomfort. It's like,
Hmm.
okay, what is this experience teaching me about myself?
Hmm.
And how honest and real can I be with myself in this moment?
Mhm.
Um, and then what does that give me? What does that give me access to? Like when I can finally say, oh, I'm feeling really depressed and I am I'm protecting myself. I'm building these layers. What's the gift of knowing this? What's the
Mhm.
point of suddenly having that awareness?
Mhm.
And it depends on the moment, on the day. Maybe that the gift is being able to um, ask for support. Maybe the gift is recognizing that that's what's been driving my unconscious actions. And so now I can make a conscious action to do something different because it doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
Um,
And then when you come to that acceptance, generally it's like get I just heard like there's a little bit of a delay, just so you know. I noticed that
yeah,
is there a delay on your end too?
yeah,
Okay. It's been happening kind of periodically, but it seems to catch up. Anyways, I lost my train of thought. Oh, when you can come to that acceptance of like, this is what I'm feeling, then generally there's that relief that you let go of that resistance and you feel so much better. And it's kind of
yeah,
like you just have to acknowledge it. Like that's really all it wants is acknowledge that I'm here. Stop trying to pretend like I'm not, you know. It's like if you had a child who was tugging on your pants and you were just ignoring it until you finally look at it and are like, "Oh, you're there." Like, I see you. Then
hmm,
you can pick it up and hold it and it seems to be fine, you know. Sometimes you need to get deeper into it if you've been ignoring it for a long time, but um something else, just side note too, because I you had mentioned this, and I just want to make sure that people know I'm not trying to like leave anyone out when I talk about masculine, feminine, or man and woman. Both of us
yeah,
are heterosexual, so that's why we tend to have just the experience of us being women, our partners being men, and we're talking in like majority, so like it's not I get that there are other dynamics and all of that. So I just want to make sure that when we talk about that, please just take it however it resonates for you, whoever you are, and whatever you identify with. But I do believe we all have both masculine and feminine. So, yeah.
yeah. Oh, and I'm gonna take a 10-second pause because my battery's low. I got to
Oh,
plug in.
no.
So
Okay.
talk more
Ding,
about that.
ding, ding, ding. Oh, I was just gonna sing until you got back. What was I saying? I forgot what I was saying. Um,
I'm back, just like
oh,
that.
that was fast. I was like sitting here trying to think, what was I
What
going
can
to
I
talk about?
say?
What can I say?
Well, and yeah, let's talk for a second about that because one of the things that as we're growing in our community, we do have many male allies. My brother-in-law listens to our podcast. Hey, Kyle. And
Yeah, thanks for listening.
yeah, and I have a lot of gay, transgender people in my life that are vitally important to me
Yeah.
that have a different perspective on um, how they identify.
Mm-hmm.
And what we're talking about is the collective, the divine masculine, the divine feminine. And like you said, Bethany, we hold both of those in ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so really when we're talking about, how men are, how the masculine is, think about areas in your life where you are very driven, very focused, very right, wrong, you need to check the box. That is that masculine drive. And the feminine is the just holding the space, the feelings, the connection. It's the I am versus the I do,
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah,
guess, of
totally.
who you are.
Yeah, and I think people who are gay or are what is it, non-binary? I don't know.
Yeah,
I feel like they are representative of this what we're talking about in that we both have both. So it doesn't matter what actual physical gender you are. Like you could be like a woman and be more masculine, and then and be gay and be want to be with a woman who's more feminine, right? Um, So I think that like all of these groups and like how inclusive we are now as a society is representative of that. It's showing that it doesn't, like, they're literally trying to show people who don't want to wake up to this fact that you're not just one or the other, you're both. You know?
Right. Yeah, and I see even in my heterosexual relationship, my husband plays the feminine role. I don't want to say frequently, but regularly.
Is that okay with you, Eric?
One of the reasons I love him,
Yeah, of
he
course.
is very sensitive, and when
Mm-hmm.
he can tap into what he's feeling and be real with it, I
Mm-hmm.
see so much more of who he is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really just a matter of finding environments, finding groups of people that can support you in all of your aspects.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Absolutely.
finding that tribe that allows you to be fully expressed
Mm-hmm.
in the masculine and the feminine, however that looks for you in all the different ways that it
Yeah.
shows up in your life.
Yep. There was one thing I kept wanting to touch on when
Hmm.
we're talking about when we go through shadow work and how we tend to isolate ourselves. Because you just mentioned like finding community, and
Yeah.
um, I feel like that, and I want to go back to what I said about like it's kind of like this energy that you kind of like are denying. Your shadow work is like a little child. It's like your inner child tugging on your pant leg, and so when it's kind of like a representation of what you're doing to that energy. It's like you're isolating yourself from it. um
Yeah.
and then not to say that it's bad, like it is absolutely okay to like seek solitude. There's a difference between, I think, isolation and solitude. I feel like
Hmm.
solitude is more conscious, and it's like I'm consciously choosing I need to be alone in order to process, and it's actually going deep into it. Isolation is more like shutting things out, um, rather than being open, creating a space for yourself and then being open. Um, but yeah, I think, what did I want to say about that? um, yeah, so I think that there's like this stigma in society about when you spend time alone. And I get this, like, because I live with people right now, and they'll be like, oh, you've just been uh, like, what are the words? I'm trying to think of the words that she said, but it was like, "Oh, you just been like locked up in your room all day." And I was just like, "Yeah." Like, like it's like people have this like, there's oh, is everything okay? Something wrong? Like, what's going on? Like, they want to know like what's happening, and you're just like, dude, like I'm fine. I'm just like spending time alone. Like, what's wrong with that? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think too, when we're living with people, that is a natural tendency because we have created this community. And I know your situation's a little different, but I'm thinking about like in families.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just thinking about like teenagers.
Mm,
There's a time in teenagers' lives where they will shut themselves in their room for hours at a
yeah.
time.
Yes.
And it's they're trying to get in touch with what the fuck is going on
Exactly.
because
Yeah.
things are so intense. And
Mhm.
and that's a time when I think as a society we recognize that that's a difficult time and people act in all kinds of erratic ways, and again it's another area where we can make people wrong.
Yeah. Because we look at
um,
their behavior,
yeah.
like as an indication of like, because again, it's like they're acting from their emotions. So they're going to be snappy, they're going to be moody, they're going to be, not
Run
want to
or
talk. Right. Yeah. Like, so, and it's like, how do we create the space for people to show up that way and still be able to be around other people? It's like the
yeah,
reason that we don't want to be around other people when we're like that is because we've had people be like, what's wrong with you? And, like get all defensive or offended or take it personally, and it's like,
yeah,
we haven't learned how to create that space. And even I still sometimes struggle with, like having a son who obviously like he goes through all kinds of changes and emotion, like, gets really, when he's really tired, he's very moody. And you just have to learn how to like be, you can't shut them out and say like, oh, you need to go be by yourself until you can, be better. Of course I've made that mistake before, but realizing it as I grow and learn, you realize, unless he's actually being very like like there is that line where if he's like attacking or being very like,
Right.
malicious or whatever, you kind of have to be like, dude, you can't treat me like that. But you also have to create that space, like I said, for them to be however they're feeling, respect their boundaries if they don't want to be around anybody, but then be open when they're ready to come to you. Right.
Right.
And I think that's just like why we've suppressed those uncomfortable feelings, or avoided them, um, isolated them, because that's probably how we were treated when we were children, when we had those feelings and went to go seek some kind of support from other people, or we acted in a way because we were feeling a certain way. And then when you finally get out of it, so like when you're in your feelings, like your deep, like messy, uncomfortable feelings, and then you kind of like, sometimes you can't help but react, right, and out of it.
Right.
And then when you come back to like your logical mind and you're feeling better and it's gone, you're kind of like, oh shit, I can't believe I did that, or I said that, and then you kind of feel bad. And if the people who you did that around make you feel bad for it, try to like hold it against you, of course you're not going to want to be around anybody when you're experiencing that again. That feels like shit.
Well, and then it becomes evidence for why, for why you're wrong for
Right.
feeling that way or being that way. So, that's why shadow work goes into the shadows. It is looking at our darkness. It is being with our darkness. And if you don't have people around that understand that or can hold space for that or help you navigate it, especially as a
Right.
child,
Yeah.
then you just continually suppress it.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's why we have all of these adults now, present company included,
Yeah.
trying to talk about these things, because we've realized that that's what happened to us and we don't want that to continue in society.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's no fun. It's no fun
No.
to look at, oh, look, I'm jealous, or
Yep.
I'm
So
judgmental.
judgy. Yeah.
And
Or
it's
I'm
funny.
controlling.
Yeah. Or, and really at the core of it, there's some really basic, um, core needs that drive those shadow aspects of ourselves,
Absolutely.
the feeling of being enough, the feeling of being accepted, of um,
Well, yeah, and it's not even just emotional needs. I mean, yes, of course it is, but it's also physical needs. We don't realize how much, like,
yeah,
if we're just super exhausted and we're tired, we're going to be really moody. We're going to be all in our, because when that happens, like our body's literally fighting for us to be inside of our body so that we can feel like what we're feeling. And so if we're irritated, if we're sad, if we're pissed off, it's probably because you need a rest. Like you need to sit still and do nothing. Because I noticed that with kids, it's like when they're really tired, they're all over the place. Their emotions are all over the place. Um, and also feeling hungry too, or feeling nourished, our body actually feeling like getting the nutrition that we need, that those physical, and also getting enough water too. Like I really feel like we overlook that basic physical needs. Yeah, let's drink some water to that. But our basic physical needs actually are pointing, or our emotions are actually pointing to that. So like whenever my son is um, having you just notice there's something off about, like he's just irrationally like lashing out, or something like that, he's super moody. I always go first to, are you tired? Are you not feeling well? Are you getting sick? Are you hungry? And then if those things are good, then you go to the emotional kind of like, I apologize if you can hear this background noise. I don't know if you can.
sounds like water.
It's someone blow drying their hair. Um, and then you go to the emotional needs. Okay, so if the physical needs are okay, then maybe what happened today, like, and then you kind of like have to go back, like, how was your day? Like, what happened? What's making you, what's underneath there that you're not talking about that's making
Right.
you feel this way, right? So it's like, and then generally he'll start to talk to me and like, well, I got in a fight with this person at school today and he pushed me, you know, things like that. And it's, you just need that space to be able to talk about like, this happened today and I didn't like how it felt. Like it made me feel bad, you know, hurt my feelings. um, and sometimes we feel silly just saying those little things, even if it's like, well, I don't know, my friend said this and it kind of hurt my feelings, you know, like that happens
Yeah.
sometimes. Yeah. So at least that's what I've noticed with children. I feel like a lot of shadow work generally points to our inner child, and
Mhm.
and just what they, like you said, it's needs. It's what need is not getting met, and how can I meet that need? It just is kind of alerting us to that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, again, to reiterate what you said about our basic needs, I was, again, a podcast I'm so influenced by.
Hence,
I'm very
what you
careful about media, but what I take in really informs kind of what my mind is thinking about. But
yeah.
I heard on a podcast something about, this generally speaking, it's in our work environment where we kind of idolize the people who work 100 hours a week, who,
Mm-hmm.
it was Elon Musk. They were using him as an example. He's held up, and I actually know somebody who one of his goals is he wants to be Elon Musk.
Mm.
And I'm like, Elon Musk works 130 hours a week and spends at least 2 or 3 nights sleeping under his bed, or
Why?
under his desk
Oh,
at his office.
that sounds terrible.
It's there's absolutely zero balance, and it's, in service of his mission to make a bazillion dollars. But then what? Like,
Yeah, what happens when you reach that goal? Then you're
well,
just,
and what, you're going to trade 10 years of misery
yeah.
for this one um award, really. I mean, like, saying I have $1 million in the bank is just a pin. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't do any good unless you're going to take that money and create a better life. And if you're going to do that, why not start doing that right now?
Right.
And like,
Yeah, what's the
it
why?
is.
Like I would be like, what's the purpose? It's really just to make that's the only goal, like that's driving you, is just to make that amount of money and just like the recognition you'll get from it. Like, to me, that's not enough.
Yeah. But I mean, I we could go off on that, but I
Yeah.
mean, the point is, subjecting ourselves to, lack of sleep, not eating healthy, sitting at computers for hours, sitting at behind a wheel for hours
Mm-hmm.
and hours and hours a day. Our bodies aren't meant for that. Like, we
Mm-hmm.
came into the world, this is our vehicle here. We need to make sure that it's, well nourished and that it's in good operating order. And we spend so much time focused on the doing of the things that we're not realizing that we're being really miserable, and
Yeah.
we're not addressing the things that are making us miserable. Like,
Dude, I
I mean,
think that's a
that's,
really excellent point, and I'm glad you brought that up because I think that shows his emotional need that's not getting met, which is obviously like validation or recognition. So that is so suppressed in him that he's literally making himself sick to achieve it, and that's the
yeah,
only way he knows how to get whatever emotional need he's attempting to get
yeah,
through the end goal of his creating
yeah,
more money. At least that's how I see it.
yeah. And that, that could be, it's, and I can't speak to his life or his experience, but what I can see is that as a society we hold him up as some paragon of,
Right.
the ideal business person,
Right.
but we're not seeing the
Whatever.
impact of
Yeah.
of his choices on how he lives his life. So
Mhm.
for somebody who, if that's their goal, then they can't expect to be in a fulfilling relationship.
Mhm.
They can't expect to be living their most adventurous life.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, you're making sacrifices elsewhere.
yeah. And not to say that you can't, make millions and be completely fulfilled. That's not it at all. The point
No, no.
is, when you become um, solely focused on something, there's a sacrifice, and there
Right. Like you
is,
said, it's an imbalance. It's not balanced.
yeah, yeah. So, shadow work is all about digging under all of that. and seeing where you're really not addressing an issue that maybe needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
And not to say that all high achievers are imbalanced, but
No.
it's definitely, I just seeing it in my own work life. I've seen people that, um, are really high up in corporate America who are, 50 pounds overweight and who, have been divorced 3 times, whose kids hate them or,
Mhm. Yeah.
whatever. It's like just recognizing that those are the choices you're making,
Yeah.
you know.
Absolutely. I was going to say something and I forgot, but I thought you made a good point about when we were talking about physical needs, because that's something I didn't mention. Is I think remembering that we need that exercise and that physical release also, that can make us feel a certain way, that can make us depressed. Like if we don't move around enough, I know that I get into a space if I don't exert a lot, energy. And my son too, like he has a lot of energy, he's got to get it out.
Yeah.
If we don't
Yeah.
move our bodies around and move that energy through us too, like that also creates stagnant energy that gets stuck and then turns into a shadow that we're not looking at.
Yeah. It's like a river that's been, I think about it like a river that's been dammed up, that water builds up toxins and then you end up with algae and
Yeah.
toxic water and all this stuff. But if the water's flowing smoothly, then you're allowing yourself to regenerate. And yeah, we're a big battery.
Yeah.
I think of the matrix, everybody plugged in, but in a
Yeah.
positive way. We are just conduits for energy, and we need to make sure that we're keeping that energy flowing by
Mhm.
taking care of our bodily needs:
Right.
sleep, movement, water,
Yeah. Food,
nourishing
good food.
food.
Yeah. Food that
Yeah.
makes us feel good. Sometimes even that too is like we condition our bodies. Like our minds are so powerful that we can tell ourselves one thing when it's actually like the opposite. So like, you know, uh, we can tell ourselves that eating this crap is going to make us feel good emotionally, but
Hmm.
we're just shutting off our connection to our body. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy to me how we can do that. And yeah, I don't know if we want to get into that, but that's like a whole other conversation.
I
um,
live with a recovering alcoholic. It's amazing what we'll say that will make us feel better that actually doesn't.
yes. Well, yeah. And you know what? I just had somebody message me on Instagram yesterday and was asking about something and, you know, kind of talking about how people did something and how it made her feel. And my response was more like, well, that's kind of the story you're telling yourself. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's true. They may not actually be coming from that place of wanting to hurt your feelings. However, you're just kind of seeing it that way. And I think what I said was, you know, you don't have to allow other people to hurt you, but even if they're doing it deliberately, they still don't control you. So
Right. You still
why
have to allow them.
right, you have to allow them to hurt your feelings. And so and then you kind of have to look at why do we do that? What are we getting from that? It kind of keeps us in that victim mentality,
Right.
um feeling like we're at effect of our emotions, and we're not. Also, well, it's actually at effect of our mind because it's like our mind is dictating what we're feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. And, that is the not the point, but I mean, it's the point of shadow work is to
Yeah.
get out of that disempowering mindset, to get to the
Hmm.
root of, um, you know, why do you feel triggered by this person?
Hmm.
What's underneath all that? And if you take a look at it through doing shadow work, um, how you can actually change that story and release it. And it's not that it'll never come up again, but you'll have enough perspective to be able to see what's happening and
Right.
then again using your mind consciously change your response to it.
Exactly.
It
Yeah.
really is.
That is the point of shadow work, is to actually go into your subconscious, unconscious, whatever you say, um, to see what's there, so that when it does come up again, it then becomes conscious for you. It's like you're
Right.
basically just like digging things up out of the ground and to bring them to the surface. So it's making the unconscious conscious. And then when you do that, that's when you have the power to consciously choose something different. And you can also call it out. And you can also, that's how you also have like healthier relationships, where you can own your shadow and you can own your triggers and be like, look, what you're doing right now, or what you're saying, is really triggering me. So I need to do this, or, like, and then you kind of like let that person know, like, oh, okay,
Mhm.
cool. Like, then they don't feel like you're blaming them or attacking them and it's their fault, right? You're just saying like, what you just did triggered me, like, it wasn't, and kind of like take away the guilt around it too. I think we
Right.
sometimes like we put it on the other person if somebody's triggering us. Like, I can't believe you did that to me. It's like they
Yeah.
know our
You
triggers,
made me.
right?
Yes.
It's like they know that, and that's where you can uh, have healthier relationships, and where you can communicate it. But first, it starts with you spending more time alone in your shadow to figure out what's there, so that when it does come up, like I said, it becomes more conscious.
So, let's talk about what is shadow work. I mean,
Okay.
we've talked about what the shadow is, and where, that whole, like, the dark side of our psyche.
The dark side.
So, a lot of I've I've been talking a lot about self-care this year, and that really is, what ultimately that's my message to people, is the value of self-care, and self-care is, um, I don't want to say the antidote, but it is the space where I meet my shadow
Mm-hmm.
and integrate the
Mm-hmm.
work that I have done.
Mm-hmm.
But shadow work, the actual working with the shadow is, like we said, it's messy. It's, it might not look like anything from the outside, but inside it's a fucking war
Yeah, yeah. Oh yeah,
sometimes.
totally.
So, yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. What does that look like for you? I mean, tell us if you've got any experiences that come up off the top of your head.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that I thought about is the way that, I mean, like, what I do with my business, it was created through my shadow work. It was created because I started going into my unconscious behaviors and was like, wow, there's a lot of shit in here that I don't like. Like, I don't want to be like that. I don't think that I didn't realize how I was being like, what I had done in the past was actually kind of destructive to myself and to other people. And it kind of like, usually there's like an event or something that happens in your life where you really look at yourself and you're like, um, I don't want to be like that. I don't like the way that I handled that. Why did I, do that? Because you see the consequences of what it does to the people that you love the most.
Hmm.
Um, and so that happened with my marriage, and how I chose to cheat, and how that whole thing ended, and that still is something that I struggle with forgiving myself for.
Hmm.
Because I love my ex-husband, like, as a person, and he's the father of my child, and I don't ever want to hurt anybody that way. It ended up hurting me probably more than it hurt him.
Hmm.
And I think that when you're not acknowledging your shadows, which is, like, the needs that you had, because I wasn't acknowledging the needs that I had in that relationship, which is why it built up, and I acted out, in that way. um, when you don't acknowledge your needs that way, you do things to where you're like, why did I just do that, like, um so anyways, my my work, the business I'm creating came through my shadow work, because I realized, okay, there's actually, like, if this is happening to me, I know this is happening for other people, like, and so I wanted to empower other people, because I was able to empower myself and not allow all of the stuff I did to bring me down, send me on a path I didn't want to be on. It actually sent me on a path of empowerment, and finding my authentic self and loving those aspects of myself, despite the fact that it did something I didn't like. Um, but like, I came to realize, well, okay, well, but that's actually a part of me, and I can't like push it away and I can't deny it. It's just a matter of, I have to get that need met, like we were just talking about. And so I'm being kind of vague here, but like it was basically like my sexual needs. I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't honoring my primal sexual needs, and that's the reason that I ended up, cheating. So, um, anyways, for me, it's not allowing it to have power over me. So like really being able to feel it. So like I allow myself that space when I can feel those uncomfortable things. I kind of just sit in it and feel it, and I analyze it, and I if you listen to Abraham Hicks, it's like they talk a lot about finding those better feeling thoughts. So I kind of like allow all of the really disgusting, negative, low thoughts to play through my head, and then I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, that felt really bad, and oh, I don't like that. And then I start to like, I'll just kind of allow my mind to like reach for the better feeling thoughts. If you listen to Abraham Hicks,
Yes.
that's what she
Yes.
says. um and that's how I kind of get, because then it feels more empowering, like, okay, well, I can actually like, look, that I feel better now, like, and I'm realize I'm doing it myself. I'm not reaching to something outside of me. Sometimes I do, yes, like look for, whether it's like listen to an audiobook, or listen to a podcast, or a person who I know will help me get out of that mindset. But
Mm-hmm.
for the most part, attempt to do it by myself first.
Yeah.
And then that's where that sense of empowerment comes from, because I think also I've felt very disempowered my entire life because of my shadows. And I think that's really just my feminine energy. I've suppressed my feminine energy for so long, I think, because I was too intense. I was too much. Everything that was going on in my family was, they couldn't handle everything that I was experiencing. It was too much for them because they were experiencing too much, because it was too, so it was just like,
Yeah.
I learned how to just squash it. That's what I did also in my marriage. And I just squashed all of the uncomfortable feelings I had because it made him uncomfortable. So I'm not going to upset the, dynamic. And so therefore I just suppressed all of my feelings. And so for me, it's like learning how to empower it on my own first. And then also then if I can't, if I'm having trouble doing that, then empowering the people whom I choose to trust the most, whether that's through friends or through people I follow. I've created like an online, following or community of people who I trust, who I know that their energy is supportive of me in that way. So I listen to their content, or I, watch their videos. Or I talk to my friends who, I've been very meticulous about who I allow into my space, and who I talk to about certain things. And so for me, it's all about feeling like I have my own power, when it comes to my shadow work. Is that,
Yeah.
is that a good, I don't know. I was like, I don't know if I answered your question, but yeah, that's what it looks like for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Usually it's a lot of, for me, it's a lot of, yeah, busy work. Like I get very kind of almost frenetic.
Mhm.
That's usually when I'm actually working through stuff. Yeah, being with those uncomfortable feelings is really uncomfortable.
Mhm.
um, for me, it's a balance of going back and forth between nourishing and nurturing myself, and then going back in, and like you said, it's like I will like, it doesn't feel good and it feels gross, and I keep like, but the moment that I can like just let go and be with it,
Yeah.
then it moves through, and it actually happens really fast. And my coach
Mhm.
actually reflected that to me, that
Mhm.
like when I'm ready to be complete with something, it's
Yeah.
done. In
Mhm.
fact, my husband and I were talking about that like the other day, and I'm like, yeah, well, when I'm complete, I
Yep.
am complete.
Totally. I feel like I'm the
um
same way too. Yeah.
and not to say that the situation, or that same shadow aspect won't come up again,
Yeah.
but in that moment I can really, like, if I can look, like both eyes fully open, yeah, I am actually feeling really, whatever the feeling is, I'm trying to tap into, something recently.
Mhm.
um
But yeah, looking it straight in the face. It's kind of like,
yeah,
it's yeah, you're just not avoiding it. You're looking at it and be like, what? It's like if somebody were bothering you or someone were bullying you, you know, it's kind of like a bully almost, like
Yeah.
tapping you on the shoulder, like trying to get a rise out of you. If you turn around and you stand up to that bully, you know,
Yeah.
and you look them in the eye and be like, what you gonna do? Then you take its power away.
Yeah. Yeah. Or even, I was thinking about the analogy of a child too. Like, hey mom, hey mom, hey
Yeah.
mom, hey mom.
Yes.
Like, and finally you're like, what?
Yeah.
And the kid's just like, hi.
Right? Yeah, that's exactly it. Kingston literally, it's like, so I get so frustrated sometimes because he'll, like, he doesn't even realize he's doing it. You know,
Yeah.
he's just like, mom, mom. And I'm like, what? And then I'm like saying what? And he just keeps saying mom. And I'm like, what? Like, you have my attention. And then it's nothing. And he's not, and he doesn't say anything. It's
He
nothing to
just wants
say.
your attention.
Yeah. I'm like, okay, hello. Like,
That's so funny. When my kids were little, they would do that. And I had a rule. If you do that and you forget what it was that you're trying to get my attention for, you have to say, I love you.
I love that. Oh my gosh. I'm going to make that now my rule for him. He says that all the time though too. He's really
Yeah.
sweet. He'll just be like, I love
But
you.
it was just like, it's a way to like close the loop
Yeah, exactly.
instead of like, oh, I forgot what it was.
right. So then you don't get frustrated and then you're like, I don't know. I sometimes get frustrated because like, what did you need? Like, did I, it's like, that's I think my masculine energy feeling like, did I not just like help? You needed me. And then I was there and I didn't do anything for you. And it was like,
Yeah.
I didn't feel like it, but I did by just being present. It was just like, he wanted my presence, and that's all he needed for that second,
And so often that's all our shadow needs is just to be
Yes.
acknowledged. Like,
Yeah.
And I do love the idea, and it's really helped me, especially in the last several years, of looking at those shadow pieces as if it's a wounded child, a smaller, younger version of ourselves, a less evolved version of ourselves that just is desperate to be acknowledged.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
And when we can acknowledge and send it love, then, and as my coach used to say, just give it a toy to play with. Send it over in the corner, give it a toy to play with. So often, a lot of my anxious tendencies, the things that I do to kind of like calm my nerves, it's just a toy to give that anxious piece of me that needs to have or do something to be acknowledged.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, here, organize these pens by color.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, exactly.
then I can let my higher brain function really focus on the more important thing, which is, I'm feeling like I need to be acknowledged. I'm feeling like I need to have a connection with somebody. And then I can actually take action to allow that to, and sometimes the action is just the allowing.
Yeah.
Allowing it to happen. I was just having a conversation with a friend who is needing or is in a relationship and is needing support, but is afraid to let a special person in their life support them. And it's not that she needs to do anything. She just needs to allow it to happen and to open up. And a lot of times that shadow work is just asking us to open up and be a little bit more vulnerable with ourselves, with the people that are important in our lives.
Yeah.
And so often that big, scary shadow that we think is going to eat us alive, just wants to be seen.
Yeah. And it actually brings us closer to other people when we talk about them or acknowledge them or go to that person we trust, a safe support figure, and we say, hey, like, this is what's going on. They can be like, yeah, like if you chose, if you have the right support that you need, that person's going to be able to make you feel like validated. That's all we really want, is to feel validated, like what we're feeling is okay. And also that everything's going to be okay. So it's like, it's just, you're going to be okay. Like, yeah, it really sucks right now. And I'm here for you, whether, it's just listening, or if you want to cry and I'll hold you or I'll hug you, whatever it is. I remember when I was experiencing some really tough times, like a couple of years ago, or last year, maybe, I don't know. No, yeah. And like you and I didn't really talk that much on the phone or like do Zoom live, but we would send Marco Polos back and forth. And I just remember like being on there, and I would just, it felt okay because maybe because you weren't live there in person, but like I knew that when you were listening, I was safe to just cry and fall apart. And you were, you know, that person who would tell me like, thank you for showing up this way. Thank you for, you know, being vulnerable and all that. And sometimes that's all we just need is just that. Well, I think that is what we need, is just the acknowledgement, the validation. But for some reason, I've noticed that this has come up more than one time with like, well, maybe not more than one time, but with like certain relationships where like the guy makes you wrong for like, oh, well, you just need to be validated. And it's like, well, yeah, motherfucker, I do. What's wrong
Yeah.
with that? Like, you
Yeah.
know, obviously you have an issue with it. So fuck
Yeah.
you. Like, don't make me feel bad for being vulnerable with you. It's almost like like, you don't see the value in that I'm actually choosing to be vulnerable with you and ask you for something or show this part of me that's actually not easy for me to just do with everybody. And you're shitting on it like that. Like, you can go fuck yourself.
Yeah.
You know, obviously that's
Not helpful.
it's not helpful. And it's also really arrogant.
Yeah.
And it's like, and
But
it's just a reflection of how they view them, how they treat themselves, you know, or how they were treated.
exactly.
And that sucks, you know. And that's where you choose, okay, you're not the person who I'm ever going to go to again for that.
Yeah. And that really is another piece of, you know, once you've started to do this work, being able to see people who are walking around in their shadow and they don't even realize it.
Yep.
And it's hard. It's not easy to be with people who are being shitty,
Yeah.
but you know, so often, and you know, especially in my
But we
in
don't have
my
to be too, by the way.
yeah, and in my family relationships, when I hear people being judgmental or just worrying about you, it's like,
Oh God.
this is
Worry
just a
about your fucking
reflection of
self.
your, yeah, this is just a reflection of your fear
Right.
of being out of control.
Yes.
Like, this is not
Absolutely.
about me. This is about you.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
That is so fucking true. It's really the element of control. You know, and that's that masculine energy of we want to feel like we're in control of things all the time.
Mm, yep.
That's the shadow part, I think, of masculine energy, because in a sense they are meant to be in control in the sense of like they are the container,
Protectors. Yeah, the
protector.
protector, the
You
container.
know,
Yeah.
that's the healthy kind of, you know, whole divine masculine. The wounded masculine is that I want to control every single aspect and I'm going to dominate, and, you know, like it's just all about what I see is needed kind of thing. So, and that not any reciprocation or partnership.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know.
Hmm.
Well, here's something. I don't know if we talked about this, but like, how do we notice when we're avoiding or distracting ourselves from our shadow? How that shows up for us and maybe for a lot of people. Well,
You know, it's interesting because my avoidance and my work look very similar,
mm,
because it is a lot of it. I do have a tendency to make it really difficult for myself. I
mhm.
squirm and you know, I'm like a kid. I'm just like, I don't want to. And then there's this moment of release and then I'm through it.
Yeah.
So I do a lot of things to avoid it. And a lot of things to work through it. So I love stories.
Mhm.
Um, I am a storyteller. I love hearing people's stories. So sometimes I will avoid my own work by helping other people work through
Yeah.
their stories,
Totally.
or watching stories. I love TV and movies, and podcasts and audiobooks. But they're also touch points for me to be able to access, oh, this story is making me feel this thing that is probably unmet, and you know, I haven't unexamined in my own life, and it gives me the opportunity to tap into it
Totally.
and move through it. How about you? Any?
Yeah, I love what you said that, because of when you said it, I was like, wow, I think that's definitely the same for me. But like, I feel like because I've done more work now, I'm more like conscious of it. I can feel, okay, I'm distracting myself now,
Yeah.
you know, and I can recognize it. But then I also have to look at, okay, why am I distracting myself? And it's because I don't feel safe to
Mhm.
actually be in that space. And so like that with moving this week, I'm like, I'm just allowing myself to be distracted because
You need it.
literally my safe my security is all fucked up. Like I have half of my stuff in one place and half my stuff in this place, you know, and I'm packing all my things up and I'm going through boxes and it's just like, it's way too much, you know, like my equilibrium is off because, you know, like
Yeah.
our physical, somebody was telling me actually, like the shortest we can survive, is when we don't have shelter. Like that's our number one thing that we need. Like we could actually survive longer without food and water. It's the shelter. Like if we don't have shelter, I think it's for like 3 days. And then I think we can go for like 3 weeks or something without, or I don't remember the details of it, but somebody
Yeah.
had told me that and I was like, oh my God, that actually makes a lot of sense. But that's also if you're in like, really, you know, harsh weather conditions also too, you know, but
Right.
anyways,
Right.
I live in California, so that doesn't really apply to me, but like that's an innate, need, right? That we have is that shelter,
Yeah.
that physical. It also goes back to that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is the basic
Right.
food, water, shelter. So anyways, I digress.
Well,
What was I saying? I noticed that too is, so what I do is obviously like phone, like I'll be on my phone, social media, watching TV, which I don't do very often. So when I do that, I actually allow myself to do it because I'm like, oh, maybe I just need a rest or break, because sometimes what I'm attempting to get a need met through that, which is like watching something that makes me laugh because I'm feeling really down, or
yes.
needing to be sad or angry. So I watch something that, you know, makes me feel a certain way.
Yes.
Eating, like that's one thing too, is like I notice if I'm drawn to be eating, because I don't really have a sweet tooth. But if I really want like sugar and I'm eating a lot of sweets, it's probably because I'm tired and I'm attempting to get that up feeling, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And so I'm
Yeah.
distracting myself from resting,
Yeah.
because I feel like if I stop and rest, I'm not doing enough because I have so much to do, you know? And then I don't want to beat myself up for it, for not accomplishing those things that I need to get done. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. When you're talking about moving, last year we redid our floors, and it
Yeah.
was the same thing. It was that feeling of being so ungrounded, and
Mhm.
also going, like, you're literally going through all your shit,
Yes.
like looking at all the stuff that you haven't looked at for years and having
Yeah.
to make decisions about, is this something I want to keep? Is this something I want to
Right.
get rid of? Where am I going to put this? And we
Mm.
can take this physical experience and extrapolate it into our energetic and spiritual experience of, you know, um, I'm staring at books, so that's what's on my mind. But like going through your books and being like, is this something that still serves me? Is this
Yeah.
something that I'm going to come back to? Is this something
Right.
I need to have access to, or can I put it back into the subconscious?
Totally.
Um, but just having to deal with all that, you have to slow down. You
Yeah.
have to
Mm-hmm.
literally slow your roll for
Yeah.
however long it takes to sort through that.
Yeah. Yep.
Something that typically happens for me when I'm moving, or when I'm, going through that, I'll get really involved in the process and then I get exhausted, and then I'm
Yes.
just like, just throw it all in a box. I'll deal with it later.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then,
Yeah.
5-10 years later, I'm having to open that box again. So it never
Mhm.
goes away
No.
until you actually make the decision to process through it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That's how I've been too, is that I could spend a lot of time, like I could totally dive deep and just spend a lot of time going through everything. But then you feel like, oh my God, where'd all my time go? And I have so many other things to do. Sometimes it's like, that's where I'm like, God, it's not balanced. You realize I'm out of balance, and that I don't balance myself enough to give myself that space and that time, because I'm too busy doing things. So
yeah.
feeling like I have things to get done. But what was I going to say? Yeah. So like when I was going through things in the garage, and taking it to my new place, it's like I'm having like my high school yearbooks and old pictures, and then like
Oh
all of
my
my
gosh.
kitchen stuff that I bought and I had at my place with my ex-husband, like, and then unpacking all of that. And so then it's like memories come up, and you're like, and then like I said, like just like realizing I have way more than I actually need. And so now I want to get rid of some stuff. And then it's like, well, what do I get rid of? And like exactly like the process you just said. I was doing that last night with my kitchen stuff. And I was like, I have like 5 tongs. Which ones do I want? Why do I have this many?
Yeah.
you know, which ones do I like better? And then you actually have to sit and go through that process of like in the future, how do I see myself using these tongs? Which ones will serve me best? And that's kind of like with shadow work is you look at all that's there and you're like, is this really serving me? Do I really need this? What do I want to keep
Yeah.
and love and empower? And what do I want to get rid of? Because I realize it's really not. It's just there because it's taking up space, you know?
Or it served a purpose at a
Yes.
certain time to keep
Mm-hmm.
you safe.
Yeah.
And we talk a lot about that in, ontological work.
Mm-hmm.
This is our natural process. We're humans, and you know, we want to keep. We're designed for homeostasis. Like
Yeah.
that's where we're drawn to, but that's not where we grow.
Yeah.
And in order to grow, we have to get uncomfortable. So,
Yeah.
um, so sometimes, shadow work involves taking a look at things and yeah, I lost my train of thought, but really
Love that.
taking a look at the things that we have collected, that we've created an important meaning around, and
Yes.
realizing that meaning, it doesn't have meaning anymore.
Yeah. Right.
um
And maybe it did once. This reminds me of the Eight of Cups in tarot. Is like
yes.
that's what that card is like, walking away from things that were once emotionally fulfilling for you, because it's a cup, so it's about emotions. And also, like, I heard one time the meaning of that card, because you notice, like, the cups are all lined up usually, I think, in the card, the images, the cups are usually like lined up and like stacked meticulously, because the person is actually took the time to look at each cup, to set them up that way, and then to realize, I don't really want this anymore. I'm actually going to go towards these other cups, because not to, and it's not like running away or like trying to say that those cups weren't meaningful. It's just an acknowledgement of, these cups don't serve me anymore, and I'm going
Right.
towards what I actually, where I want to be.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's important to understand. I had several conversations with my ex-husband about the concept. He used to say that, our marriage failed. And I'm like,
Mhm,
it didn't. It
mhm.
was incredibly fulfilling and incredibly meaningful, and it served its purpose. And we came to the natural conclusion
Yeah.
of our relationship in that form.
Yes.
And that's what it really means to be complete. It's
Yes.
not shoving it aside, not dealing with it, or deciding that, making some judgment about it. It's just acknowledging that it doesn't serve us anymore. And
Right.
it's okay. And, we can thank that shadow piece for its work in our lives, for keeping us safe, keeping us
Hmm.
protected. And also, setting it free, letting it go, so that you can move on and continue to grow.
Yeah. And I think sometimes this is where like conflicts in relationships come up, because we feel like we have to blame the other person. Like, when we can feel that there isn't, that it's probably time for the relationship to end, but we're not really, really good at like ending it with good feeling, or because we want to, well, it's really because we don't want to feel the sadness and the grief of it. But so we end up
Yes.
blaming the other person and making them wrong. And then we can hold on to that like resentment and grudges and be like, oh, well, they did this, so that's why it ended. But really, what happened was, the conflict was happening because you weren't really meant to be together at that moment anymore. Like,
Right.
you needed to
Yeah.
go your separate ways. But um that's how we avoid being in the deep feeling of loss, or letting go of something that was once really fulfilling for us. So it's like, I know, like, I think humans just in general have a hard time of letting go of people when you have attachments or things to them, because you attach yourself to those good memories, too. And you're like, well, but all these other things. But it's like, but no, but right now it's just not working.
Yeah. And there's a difference between being complete with something and rejecting something, you
Yeah.
know.
Too.
Um,
That's true.
and I think too, we have a society in general that is much more comfortable with anger.
Yes.
Like, it's okay to be angry about something.
Hello,
It's not
war.
okay to be sad about something.
Right.
Just get over your sadness.
Mhm.
I can't tell you how many times I've, seen, either in person or on social media, or even in, like, stories, TV shows and stuff where you know, somebody breaks up with somebody and it's like this automatic of like vilifying the ex, like
Mm-hmm.
they're a piece of
Mm-hmm.
shit. They made you feel blah 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 blah.
Yes.
And yeah, it's just changing the story. You know,
Yeah.
that is the shadow there, that blaming, that disempowered feeling. The empowered piece is taking that, pulling it out, recognizing, you know, that that is just a protective measure. And when you're complete with something, you don't have to judge it as good or bad.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
just was.
That shadow has been coming up for me recently. I've noticed um, the not being able to just, you know, like wanting to blame that person, you know, for like
Yeah.
just, oh God, yeah, so much anger and you know, like resentment, and it's your fault that we're in this position, and how dare you, and why did you do that? Like all of that, like
Yeah.
that definitely is something I'm experiencing. I've noticed I've been experiencing recently, and
Yeah.
it sucks, especially when
Yeah.
you feel like you're a pretty conscious, aware, mindful person, and you're like, this fucking sucks. Like, why am I acting this way? Why am I feeling like this? It doesn't make you feel like, you know, I don't know, good about yourself. And I think
And
that's too, like shadows sometimes make us feel, it humbles. I think it humbles us, right?
mhm.
It brings us to our knees, and you have to find some humility.
Yeah.
Even if it's, you know, and it's not like if people do or say things that really were hurtful or destructive, and it like hurt you, like you also have to acknowledge that like sometimes people's actions are not, you know, it's not like we're saying that their actions are um appropriate, you know, or good or bad or whatever. It is what it is, but you have to take the responsibility for like coming to the finding the peace with it, being able to be complete with it. And if you're angry about it, you're not complete with it.
Right. Right. Yes. And I always remember that, like when I'm considering, am I really complete with this?
Mm-hmm.
Can I sit with the whole experience, with the
Yeah.
whole person,
Yeah.
and not be triggered, to not want to put, like, there's no energy left in it. It's just,
Yep.
it's complete,
Yep.
you know?
Yeah.
It's like letting all the air out of the balloon, and then eventually it will
Totally.
rest. It'll be
Yeah.
done.
Yeah. And then you'll
There's
be like,
nothing
okay, I
left.
can finally that the energy's gone from that situation, you know. Yeah, definitely. But yeah, we
Mm,
can't get to that place if we don't sit still and allow ourselves to be to hear and feel and, you know, experience all of what we're not allowing.
yeah.
Um, like I think I got really, really sick last week because I was too busy going, and not resting enough. And
Yeah.
so usually our bodies will do that to us when,
Yeah.
you know, we're not allowing ourselves to rest,
Yep.
get sick,
And
or
it's
yeah.
and it's chronic. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I'm in a protracted state of having pushed for too long, and the last year has been me having to actively practice pulling back and doing less. And
Yeah.
it's hard and it's
Mm-hmm.
humbling and it's frustrating.
Yeah.
But but if I can be with it, if I can acknowledge, well, shit, I I have no energy today, and I can do a bunch of shit badly, or I can be really good at sourcing myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's what the practice is you know, and I think we mentioned this before we started recording, which is like it's never going to go away. Like it's never, there's no end destination
Yeah.
where you drudge up all of your shadow stuff and then you're good and you're just perfect the rest of your life. Like that's unrealistic. And so it's your stories or your shadows are always going to be there. And it's just a matter of, or did we talk about this already? I don't know. We've been talking for a while. It's never going to go away. So you can't have that expectation. And if you do, you're just going to continuously be disappointed every time it comes up because
Yeah.
you're triggered by someone or something. It's how you are aware of it and then react from that place is what, you know, is the practice, is the lifelong thing. Your stories and your the unconscious behaviors are always going to be there.
Yeah, yeah. And yes, they will always be there, and it's so much more, what's the word, empowering
Mm-hmm.
to be able to be with it rather than letting it happen out around you.
Yeah.
I was talking with my girlfriend last week, and we were talking about, it's important. You got to address those issues because they're coming out.
Yeah.
And if you're trying to pretend like they're not, it's like putting your thumb over a garden hose. You're not going to stop the water from coming out. It's
Mm-hmm.
just going to go all over the place, and it's going
Yeah.
to go out sideways, and it's going to be messy.
Yes. And then eventually it'll pop,
Yeah, exactly.
and it'll be
Because
a huge stream, and it's just, you're going to blow up.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
then but once you do that, it's consistent, it's flowing, and then it becomes more, it's easier. Like we put so much more energy resisting things than we do to just allowing. And if we just allowed, we wouldn't feel, I think, so depleted, probably.
Well, yeah, it's a lot of energy to try and it's a lot of energy to ignore something because
Yes.
you are putting the energy into holding it back
Mm-hmm.
and then also trying to carry on with your normal life. You're
Yes.
literally splitting your energy. And
Yeah.
if you can put all the energy over here to address this, calm it down, then you can come back into,
Yeah.
whatever productive part of life. And not that shadow work's not productive, but
Yeah.
that masculine forward action.
Well, yeah, it's the back and forth. It's the dance between the two. It's not all one
Yes.
or all the other. It's, okay, now it's time to do this. Okay, now it's time to do that. Now it's time to do this. And it's the back and forth. It's
Yeah.
acknowledging and recognizing and honoring both when it's time to do that. And you feel within your body when it's time to do each, and
Yeah.
that's really what it's about.
Yeah.
Allowing the space for both. So yeah, I think this is probably a good place to stop because I think we've been talking for a while.
Yes, we have.
But it's been really great. And if you're listening,
I
and
would like to finish up with
go ahead, go ahead.
I was just going to say I'd like to finish up with, if you are, looking at your shadow and and that's what we do as ontological coaches, is we hold space for you to help you acknowledge that, help move through it, help to realize what's coming up, and
Mm-hmm.
how to have a more empowered life by embodying the wholeness of you,
Yeah,
shadow and light.
exactly. Absolutely. So yeah, if you're interested in working with either of us, we do work one-on-one with people. Our information is below. And also, if you want to hear more about this, or if you have specific questions that you want us to have another chat about, please email us. And that
Mm-hmm.
is also below. And yeah, I think this is such a juicy topic that we could sit here and probably talk for another hour if I didn't have to pee really bad.
I know, me too.
It's all that drinking water. Hopefully you guys also have to pee.
Yes.
That's a sign your body's working in the correct way. Okay, so
Yes.
yes, send us a question or just a comment, or let us know how it resonated for you, how it impacted you, what you got out of it. And also, if you're interested, we are now available on Patreon, where we provide exclusive content. Specifically, after we interview each guest, Roxanne and I then record a separate video that's about 20 to 30 minutes long, and it is our ontological perspective of the topic we just discussed with our guest. So that is available on Patreon. We also are creating new moon and full moon videos. So I do the tarot card readings, checking into the energy of each new moon and full moon every month. And then Roxanne is doing embodiment practices. Do you want to say anything about that, Roxanne?
Yeah, it's just the embodiment practices will be some sort of movement practice for yourself to help move the energy of what's coming up, either astrologically or just with the full and new moon, just to help you get in touch with being present with yourself, and again, accessing that energy and moving it through your body.
Yeah, awesome. So that's on Patreon for just $5 a month. You can get all of those videos monthly, and information will also be below if you want to subscribe and join us. So thank you guys so much for listening.
Thank you. Stay wild.
Stay wild. Bye.